He's the one that wants to celebrate Masada, and we couldn't change the lives. Like, we couldn't talk to him.
Like, see, you took his shirt off.
No, the brother did. So, no, let's just not have steps.
The food is downstairs. Set up upstairs. Couldn't manage it.
I am bad. It's only a good condition. Sit down. There's a trail. You can walk up there.
There were many peoples that were destroyed by the Roman Empire. I mean, where are the Midianites today? Where are the Amalekites? Where are the Philistines? All these peoples who lived in the Middle East that have disappeared because some empire has marched through and taken them off. The story of Masada should have been the end of the Jewish people. This should have been the end of the movie. Big dramatic finale for a very amazing story. It should have been the end. But it wasn't. But it gets really, really hard after this. My people are spread out into the world. We are in what we call the exile, the diaspora. Okay, in the beginning in the Middle East, and later on into Eastern Europe, and later on to Western Europe, and then later on some of the people make it to the United States on one side and Australia on the other side. But always, we managed to keep our identity together. Now, I'm not saying that many of the people were not lost. The identity was not lost. But always there was a tiny community of Jewish who managed to keep the identity together. And because we had our own identity, I'm saying the persecution was pretty harsh. The persecution against the Jewish people is the worst that any people have ever suffered on a regular basis for the last 2,000 years. Part of it is religious persecution. We said in the New Testament, let the blood of Jesus be on us and our descendants forever. And a lot of people took that seriously, and we were called the Christ killers for many years. And Jews were slaughtered just because they killed Jesus. Part of the persecution was social. I mean, I'm not objective, but we're a very successful people, okay? And, there is jealousy that is connected. I mean, we're different. We have a different religion. We look a little bit different, okay? So there was jealousy. There was a balagan. Come on, guys. Off you go. Off you go. And there was a little bit of a balagan. And what I'm trying to say is that the persecution was horrific. Jews were killed on a regular basis just for being Jews. And I could tell you about the Spanish Inquisition, when the king and queen of Spain decided that all the Jews had 1 month to leave Spain, and they were not allowed to take anything with them unless they converted to Christianity. A lot of the Jews left. All of my wife's family that ended up in Istanbul in Turkey actually originally were in Spain. That's why my wife speaks Espanol, which is a combination of Spanish and Hebrew. Okay? And by the way, when the Catholics decided that they weren't sure that everybody that converted was a real converter, really converted, they created an organization called the Inquisition. That was job who was to torture Jews, to torture people to find out if they were real Christians or not. I mean, the persecution was horrific. And the worst of the persecution, I mean, I don't have to go through the whole story, is the Holocaust. Where, 1/3 of all the Jews in Europe were mass murdered. I mean, as part of an industrial system. It's horrific. And what I'm trying to say, we shouldn't even be having this conversation today. But God said we would. And in the synagogue that you see down there, okay, one of the few passages that they actually found was a passage from the book of Ezekiel that I'm going to read. Most of you know this passage. And it says, the hand of the Lord came upon me and brought me out and set me down in a valley full of bones. And he caused me to pass by the bones. There were many, many bones in the valley, and they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, Oh God, you are the one that knows. This is known as the prophecy of the dry bones. And if you remember the story, Okay? The bones come together, the sinew comes together. And at the end of the process, he says this. O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up from your graves and bring you to the land of Israel. And then you shall know that I am the Lord. O my people, and I have brought you up from your graves, and I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your own land, that you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it. That's what they found in that synagogue. And the fact that I'm even standing here today and having this conversation with you means that this prophecy has been fulfilled. But it came at a horrific price. We came back. We managed to hold our identity, but it came at a terrible price. Anybody ever heard of the wandering Jew? The Jew that wanders from place to place. Why does he wander? Because the persecution, at some point, the neighbors, the government, the country is going to rise up against you and decide to decree something against the Jews. Okay? Everybody knows how horrific it is. Anybody know who runs the diamond business in the world? Jews do. You know that? Jews run the diamond business in the world. Why do Jews run the diamond business? Because it is the easiest way to move, transport large amounts of wealth from place to place. Diamonds were considered the easiest way to transport wealth. Okay? It's much, much easier than heavy metals. Heavy metals are heavy. Okay? It's easier than currency because different countries, different currencies. Diamonds would always be a way. So that's why Jews have always been part of the diamond business. I don't know if you know that. Jews traditionally are violin players and not piano players. Why?
Easy travel.
He can travel. What I'm trying to say is the persecution was horrific, and the Jews living in the exile learned how to get along. And how do we do that? We used to do that by turning the other cheek. Not confrontational, not fighting, not worrying. And what I'm trying to say is that the Jewish people, after the event that happens here, go out there and we become a different kind of people. We change the language. We don't speak Hebrew anymore. What do we speak? Anybody know what Jews speak? Yiddish. What's Yiddish? It's a combination of German and Hebrew, okay? Okay, that all the Jews all over the world used to speak, okay? The thing is this. In the late 1890s, early 1900s, Jews started coming back to their homeland. This is our homeland. We came back because of that prophecy that you just now read. But we came back to rebuild our homeland. And here, everything is different. Here, you don't pick up and go to the next village. Here, you stand up and fight. Here, this is ours. So when the Jews start coming back here, they wanted to change from the Jew of the diaspora that puts his head down to the Jew of the Holy Land that holds his head up. And the story of Masada becomes the connector for who we are. The story of Masada is a story about Jews who did not put their head down, who did not let it happen, and when they had no choice, they killed their wives and their children just not to become slaves. The story of Masada becomes a symbol for who we want to be. It becomes a symbol for the change we want to make from all of those 2,000 years of being different. So when the young pioneers come back and start building the kibbutzim and building everything, they come up to Masada and they remember what happened in Masada, and they swear that this shall never happen again. That we're coming back and never again will we be pushed out of our homeland. And Masada becomes a symbol for the new Israeli. After 2,000 years, this is who we want to be. And that's why the story of Masada is so important. And during the War of Independence, when you're up against the wall, we were almost losing. Somebody would stand up and yell, Masada will not fall again. And that would be the battle cry to get them together. And when the state of Israel becomes a country in 1948, okay, they decided to have the swearing-in ceremony for young soldiers here in front of the synagogue. Guys, I was 18 when I became a soldier. I marched up the snake path at night. The cable car went above. Marched up the snake path. Stood in front of that synagogue right there. I hold a Bible in one hand. I held a rifle in the other hand. And I swore that Masada would never fall again. That's who we are. And that's why the story of Masada is so important. It's a dramatic story. It's an amazing story. But the symbol of Masada is so much more important than the story itself. The symbol of who we are. The symbol of us coming back after 2,000 years and fulfilling that prophecy that was found in that synagogue right there. And standing here today and proving that this will never happen again. So if you want to understand the Masada, understand the story, understand the Romans and this, but understand what it means for us. And this is where I'm allowed, as an Israeli, as an officer in my army, as a father, as a grandfather, hopefully if they ever get married and give me kids, you know, oh my God. Okay. To stand here and say, never again. Never again will my people be pushed into a corner where the only choice that they can make is death or slavery. Never again will my people lose this country. Never again will we be conquered by anybody else. The whole story of Masada, you need to understand that it means for us that Masada will never fall again. And that's what makes this story so important. Maybe one illustration, just so you get a little bit of an understanding. Listen, I was born in the States. My family are European Jews who emigrated from Poland to the United States in 1904. You guys know the whole Ellis Island story, the whole story. All the Hollywood studios are Jews that come from the village next to the village where my grandfather came from. I mean, this is where we were. And they set up shop in the United States. But they were Jews of the diaspora. My grandfather spoke Yiddish, owned a grocery store in downtown Baltimore, and couldn't understand how a whole country of Jews, nobody speaks Yiddish. Because one of the things that we did as part of this process to reconnect to who we were, we killed off Yiddish and reinvented Hebrew. We speak Hebrew today. We don't speak Yiddish. Okay? And he couldn't understand why nobody spoke Yiddish. But one small event to kind of illustrate, I used to go back to the States on a regular basis. My father worked for TWA, so we had free flying rights. We'd go back and forth. And I still remember driving up to my grandfather's grocery store one day, and somebody had thrown a rock through the window and looted the store. Now, my grandfather had been there for 30 years. I don't know how long. And I remember being really, really angry, being offended. And I remember, driving up and seeing this, and I said, Grandpa, I know the kids in the neighborhood. I mean, I've been there all my life. I mean, let's go see who did this. Let's find out. It's somebody from the neighborhood. Somebody knows. Let's make a balagan. And my grandfather said, no, I don't want a balagan. I don't want a balagan. I'll fix the window. I don't really care. I don't want to make an issue about this. And I remember being upset with him for not being upset. It took me many years to realize that me and him live in different worlds. He lives in a world as a minority, as somebody who is afraid. I live in a world of people who come out of Masada. It's different. Here you stand up for who we are. Anybody about anything about Israelis knows that we stand up for what we believe. And what I need you to understand, that difference is symbolized by Masada. Masada becomes the connector of who we were with who we want to be and who we are today. That's what makes Masada so important. So if there's anything I want you to take from the story of Masada, just take this. Masada will never fall again. And that's episode 4. I don't know if Israel has nuclear weapons.